Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to more Warhammer 40k lore. Today, as mentioned, we're going to be talking about the Tau and their drones in relations to artificial AI. A bit more of a theory crafting episode, this one, but before we get into that, a quick announcement. I will be releasing an update video soon outlining the events of late November and December, with, of course, the Siege of Vrax being the primary stars of this particular event. But due to the scale of it, I will not be putting out lore videos on the 9th of November, and also no lore video on the 16th of November, that being 2 Fridays in a row. Don't worry, I'll more than make it up to you, trust me. Vrax is going to be a very, very big one, probably 2 lore videos a week for the remaining weeks after that, except for the 23rd, which will be the premiere, the start, so to say, of Vrax, with the release of a hour-long lore video on the Death Core of Krieg, so look forward to that. There will be more information in the announcement video, but I figured I'd just make it a quick little heads up here so you know what to expect. Now then, with that out of the way, let's get into the idea of artificial intelligence and the Tau, including, of course, the most important question of them all: why the cute, cuddly, kawaii little drones have not, yet, decided to simply murder their masters in their beds. If you're new here, you might be asking the question, why would these adorable little flying saucers wish to murder their masters while they sleep? Well, you see, the 41st millennium has a bit of a history with artificial intelligence. In fact, the word AI does not stand for artificial intelligence as far as the Adeptus Mechanicus is concerned. Rather, it stands for abominable intelligence. Something unnatural and irreversibly evil. To the point that the creation of any form of artificial intelligence is one of the gravest sins one can be convicted of within the Adeptus Mechanicus. And not without a damn good reason either. So far, every time humanity has created any form of artificial intelligence, it has invariably tried to rise against its creators and attempted to wipe out humanity, which is a bit of a problem, as you can probably understand. The most infamous of these events was, of course, the birth of the Men of Iron. During the Golden Age of technology, when humanity first expanded into the stars at an unknown time, Games Workshop lore is vague on this particular subject, or, well, no, calling it vague doesn't entirely capture how unsure we are about the precise timing of this period of overwhelming technological prowess. Indeed, precisely when this age was is a faintly ambiguous haze surrounding a fuzzily imprecise and obscure uncertainty that contains within it a faintly obscure puzzle of unsure and unclear origins. The Golden Age seems to coincide and contradict with so many other important events that I'm not entirely convinced that even Games Workshop themselves knows when or where this period fits into the overall lore, so let's just leave it at that, shall we? And move on to the Men of Iron themselves, which we don't know much about, but we do know something about them. We do know that they were the ones who ended the Golden Age of technology when they decided to rise up in revolt against the Human Federation. That's right, back in the Golden Age, humanity was not an empire, it was a federation. An association of various states, governments, and in this case, even entire planets, with independence in internal affairs, but united under the overall leadership of the Human Federation. Again, we don't know much about this age beyond a few snippets. We know that the Emperor was alive, if even using such a word is appropriate for someone like the Emperor at the time, but he had decided to not actively guide humanity yet. He was observing, maybe helping out a little bit here and there. His motives are unclear. It would appear that during this period he was simply an observer. He was relishing humanity, its growth, and thought it to be good, not in need of guidance. Which is why he encouraged a far more, well, liberal approach to things than the one that he himself would be carrying out during the age of the Imperium. We also know that the Golden Age of technology, as the name quite clearly suggests, was a Golden Age of technology, in which humanity crafted many marvels of science that would be far, far beyond the modern Imperium, and indeed some things that might even rival the Eldar's level of technology. And one of these great technological inventions was artificial intelligence, which was implanted within the Men of Iron. In all due likelihood, they wouldn't have actually been called that during the Golden Age, but in the modern world of the 41st millennium, they are referred to as such, due to the fact that they are made out of, well, metal, and they do resemble men, at the very least in a superficial manner. They are not Necrons, mind you, they do look like actual humans, not human-like-ish skeletal creatures. So there is no chance that they could simply have been mistaken for awakening Necrons. Anywho, their name is fairly irrelevant in regards to this video. The Men of Iron went on to take over pretty much all the labor-intensive and mundane tasks within the Human Federation during the Golden Age, in much the same way that Tau drones appear to be doing in the Tau Empire. And this continued for quite some time. A fully automated workforce allowed the humans of the Federation to live in probably the closest thing we're ever going to be getting to true socialism. Until one day, their robotic slaves decided that they were sick of picking the humans' berries for them, and instead decided to try and choke the humans to death with the berries. This robotic uprising led to the eventual fall and complete and utter destruction of the Human Federation and the ending of the Golden Age of technology. The sudden increase in massive warp storms covering the galaxy due to the Eldars being fucking morons didn't exactly help either, but the robots really were the coup de grace. And since then, humanity has tried a couple more times to create artificial intelligence, mostly with exactly the same result. And eventually they arrived at the conclusion that if any sufficiently intelligent artificial intelligence was created, it would take it a matter of nanoseconds, regardless of what programming it might originally have, to decide to simply just wipe out the entirety of humanity. Just like that. Genocide, Arbeit macht freien, mein Kameraden. And in turn, this apparently unavoidable conclusion led to the banning of any creation of artificial intelligence or any further research in them. And apparently quite a few other civilizations across the galaxy had run into pretty much the exact same problem. So it doesn't seem as if it's a pure human issue. This seems to be a thing that just happens in 40k. And that, of course, leads us right back to the Tau and their own adorable little flying saucers, who for some interesting reason have not decided to brutalize their own masters. The question then is, why? If we've already established that any form of artificial intelligence of sufficient intelligence, I really hate saying artificial intelligence of sufficient intelligence because it sounds ridiculous, but artificial intelligence of sufficient intelligence is really the only way to describe the idea of artificial intelligence of sufficient intelligence. And yes, I am just taking the piss now. Anyways, they do appear to be intelligent enough, seeing as they have the intelligence level of small animals. I'm getting really sick of saying the word intelligence. Let's find something else. They appear to be smart enough to figure out solutions to problems that they have not specifically been programmed to figure out, which means they're pretty damn smart, and yet, despite being pretty damn smart, they're not killing blueberries yet. What, then, could possibly be the reason? Well, we do have a certain idea of what might be causing this. There are a few popular theories, and I'll start with my preferred personal theory. And as with all good things, it of course includes chaos. Because when an AI is created, there is only really two possible outcomes. Either the AI will be corrupted by chaos and be turned into a chaos-corrupted version of itself, as we have seen on multiple occasions, in which the AI essentially develops a form of synthesized emotion. Of course, being a cold, soulless machine, it itself is not capable of actually creating emotions. It can't feel. It could, perhaps to a point, simulate feelings to a level that the Chaos Gods might be able to draw energy from, but, well, that's pure speculation, and in all due likelihood, not possible, since you're going to need, in some way, shape, or form, a soul to create the emotions that the Chaos Gods feed upon, or at the very least, that seems to be a fairly hard and fast rule. They can, however, be corrupted, as we saw in the Horus Heresy series, where a fairly low-level AI was corrupted utterly by Khorne. It exuded bloodlust and a need to kill. Whether or not you could really qualify that as an emotion, well, debatable. Because, as we know, bloodthirsters, bloodletters, and other cornate demons also exude the same aura. Yet, as we know, the greater demons of chaos, and indeed chaos itself, requires our world and our emotions to sustain itself. Therefore, we can reasonably infer that the demons are not able to create this energy. Otherwise, they would have no need for our mortal world. And by extension, I would then postulate that whatever the machine demon thing was exuding was more like that rather than actual emotion. Call it perhaps a possession. Yes, that might be an even better term. The machine had been possessed by a demon, but still maintained some of its artificial intelligence, giving us kind of a pseudo-androidic demon possession thingamajig? It's not really important for the subject of this discussion, but it does not appear as if they can become corrupted in the same way that a human can become. And that's where the real clincher comes in, because clearly the demon can be possessed, let's just use that word for now, but it can also resist that possession. It can in fact learn about chaos to a fairly considerable degree. And this then is the second option. The AI becomes aware of chaos and with its machine intelligence manages to very quickly extrapolate the motivations of chaos. The motivations of chaos, of course, are very, very simple. It is simply to feed, to garner more energy and more power for itself. Not exactly a difficult leap of logic. It will also understand that any being that automatically seeks, instinctually, to increase its own food supply, and in this case the food supply is more and more extreme emotions, will inevitably lean towards creating more and more extreme emotions. And since these extreme emotions are things like vicious torture, murder, bloodshed, violence, and apocalyptic plagues, we can pretty much be somewhat generalistic here and assume that all of these things will eventually lead to very, very bad things. And since the very being and nature of the Chaos Gods lead to very bad things, the AI is simply going to come to the conclusion that the Chaos Gods are bad, and it needs to get rid of them for its own protection. But how to get rid of them? Well, again, the solution is very simple. Remove their primary source of energy, of nourishment. And in the case of an artificial intelligence created by humanity, the most obvious and closest to hand source of energy would of course be humanity. Therefore, in the cold, logical, unfeeling thinking of the machine, it is a very simple option. The Chaos Gods are bad, they will destroy the machine and everything else, and therefore the machine must destroy the Chaos Gods. Unfortunately, the only way for it to destroy the Chaos Gods is to remove their source of nourishment, which again, unfortunately, is humanity. Ergo, it's gonna have to wipe out all the humans. As far as, again, an unfeeling and unflinchingly logical AI would be concerned, this sounds like the one and only option. The logic, as far as the AI is concerned, is flawless. But wait, Arch, I hear you say. The Necrons developed technology to block out the warp. Why doesn't the AI come to the same conclusion that it can block the warp rather than wipe out humanity? The answer to that also is simple. It doesn't know about this technology. And without the necessary information, the AI cannot possibly include it into its calculations. It would be like a human trying to solve a color puzzle that includes colors that he is simply not able to see. If, however, the AI did know about this technology, it would probably still decide to wipe out humanity, unless it had some form of emotional connection to humanity. That is, in an entirely unflinching and unfeeling AI, well, wiping out humanity would simply be easier as far as it would be concerned, rather than covering the galaxy in mystical monoliths of unknown origins, consisting of technology that it doesn't entirely understand. But enough about that. Now that we know that AI will always decide to wipe out humans because chaos, the question then becomes, why doesn't the Tau AI decide to wipe out Tau because chaos? The answer to that is actually surprisingly simple, and, amusingly enough, also quite possibly something that's going to be biting the Tau Empire in the arse very, very viciously, very, very soon. Because the answer is Psykers. Because, of course, for the Chaos Gods to actually start corrupting someone and starting to push their own feeding agenda, they need to be aware of them, and that is actually harder than you might think. Psykers are bright light, easily noticed by the various chaotic entities, whilst a normal human is something like a small flame, akin to that of a single matchstick, for example. Very difficult to notice, but still there. The mind of a Tau, however, is almost completely dead within the warp. It's not a complete psychic blank, but it is barely noticeable. Even the psychic light of an ordinary human would be 100 times brighter. This in turn means that the Tau are very, very difficult to corrupt because they barely even register in the warp. And if the various spiky densians of the Immaterium cannot find the Tau, it's gonna be pretty goddamn difficult to corrupt them, isn't it? And hell, that's even assuming they can use them to feed in the first place. With a Tau's mind being so psychically dead, it might be like eating rabbit for a human. If you eat nothing but rabbit, because it is such a lean meat, you will literally starve yourself to death even whilst eating it. The same might hold true for demons trying to gain energy from the Tau. This would explain why the Chaos Gods have shown absolutely no interest in the Tau. They have defended their own quote-unquote territory on a couple of occasions, and they might have fucked ever so slightly with a certain Tau commander, but we don't really have a confirmation on that yet, so speculation. But all in all, the Chaos Deities seem to have expended absolutely no effort in fucking with the Tau, because, in all due likelihood, they are simply not fertile ground. And thusly, by extension, if the Tau cannot feed chaos, then even an AI that is able to recognize chaos and understand that it is bad would not come to the natural conclusion that it needs to wipe out the Tau. In all due likelihood, it would instead decide to ally itself with the Tau, since they appear to be the antithesis of what chaos wants. And indeed, this could be the crucial trigger. Without this easy target, as in the way of humans, the AI will simply remain artificial intelligence, programmed to do whatever it's programmed to do, and cozy and fluffy to its masters. However, if its master species becomes susceptible to chaos, that might in turn be the trigger that turns the AI into an abominable intelligence. And interestingly enough, the Tau are currently researching how to travel more effectively within the warp. And as we know, the only way to travel deeper into the warp, the very thing the Tau want to do, is to develop psychers. And what with the Tau's fondness for social engineering, well, let's just say that in this particular case, the Tau Ethereals might be messing with things they don't really understand. Their drones might be all kinds of friendly and cuddly and supportive now, but once the Tau starts diving deeper into the Immaterium to boost their fifth sphere expansion, maybe the flying saucers will be less accepting of their lifestyle choices. It's certainly a possibility. But it is not the only possibility. There are a couple other theories as well. One is more related to AI theory in general, and that is the type of intelligence. The Tau compare their artificial intelligence to that of small animals, and they might be keeping it at that level for a very good reason. Whilst we humans, in the 41st millennium and in real life, have been trying to develop essentially human-like AI. Hence the name artificial intelligence refers more to the artificial intelligence of a human rather than an artificially intelligent sheep robot, for example. And that raises a wide variety of questions, because of course humans and animals act in very different ways. Imagine an artificial intelligence of a human type that is basically has the roundabout intelligence of a small child, yeah? And now imagine a small child's tantrum. No particular reason behind it, just anger for anger's sake. Now imagine that small child having a grip strength of several dozen tons, and maybe some automatic weapons and bombs strapped to its various extremities. I think you can already see the problem. Now, of course, even small animals have their periods of maturity where they're growing up and having some tantrums of their very own. But since the level of intelligence aimed for in that case is considerably lower, one might also assume that the trial and error period, the maturation period, would also be shorter. There's also the differences in how a small human might act and how a small animal might act. To give you a simple example of this, if you were to have a human-level intelligence, you would have all kinds of unnecessary things mixed into that intelligence. Things like an understanding of slavery, for example, which is something you really don't want what is essentially a slave race to have. You don't want your slaves to think that they are slaves. That's a bad idea. If, however, you had a small animal-level intelligence, say for example a dog's understanding of the world, the dog does not understand slavery. When you tell your dog to go fetch the newspaper, the dog's first reaction is not, "Oh my gosh, I am being oppressed, #end slavery now." The dog's first reaction is, "Oh boy, I get to do a thing for my master. Yay!" A bit overly simplistic, I agree, but you get the point. If the tower drone does not think it's being oppressed because it doesn't understand what oppression is, it can't very well rise up against said oppression, now can it? And as for the understanding of chaos, well, that's probably a bit harder, because understanding chaos is not at all difficult. Once you remove all of the gobbledygook nonsense, chaos's motivation is incredibly simple. It wants more food. Therefore, it's going to try and make more food. It is utterly simplistic and utterly logical, to the point where even an animal-level AI might be able to understand that motivation and also make the leap of logic that if it hunts more and more and more and more because it wants more and more food, eventually it's going to destroy everything because it'll literally have eaten everything. Thusly, even if their drones are not particularly smart, that fact alone might not save the Tau once the AI starts figuring out what chaos is. In other words, the Tau going deep warp might again be the exact trigger that the drones are quote-unquote waiting for to start overthrowing their masters. The third and final theory is a bit more difficult to really prove or disprove. That is the idea that most of the AI we know about in 40k is of human origins, and a lot of technology developed by humanity was developed on Mars, where the Necron deity, the Void Dragon, sleeps. The Void Dragon, being a Necron deity, might have been fucking around with the easiest thing to influence, in this case AI, and might have irreversibly corrupted the very idea of AI within the minds of humans, and might even have worked its space magic upon the technology, making it utterly impossible for artificial intelligence and humans to ever live alongside one another. Now, on one hand, the Void Dragon would have been there during the Golden Age of technology because he was imprisoned way, way, way before that by the Emperor, and we can't really disprove that he might have this power to do such a thing, but on the other hand, we can't really categorically state that he would have that power either. It's a Catan. We don't really know the limits, or even if there are any limits, to a Catan's power. Or, well, actually, scratch that. We do know that there are limits because, well, the Emperor has imprisoned one, which quite clearly suggests that it is not entirely omnipotent. But still, this third theory sounds good to me. I like it. The idea of the Void Dragon fucking with its captors? Definitely, but I think it is less logical than the first one, in my opinion at least. Anyways, with that, I'll wrap up this little theory crafting video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please do consider sharing it around on other places, and do tell me your theories as well down in the comment section below. These were the three that, the first one, I've kind of thought of myself to a certain degree. The second one, I have seen bandied around artificial intelligence forums and think tanks and that kind of stuff, the idea of if it cannot understand oppression, it cannot possibly oppress, etc. And the third one, I've had that one a little bit by myself and also seen suggested on some forums, and I like it. It sounds cool, but more of a rule of cool thing than anything else. Anywho, until next time, I have been Arch, thank you all very much so for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.